All right, well, hello again. Welcome, local colleagues. The California Climate Energy and Collaborative team is really pleased to welcome you back. This is our 5th meeting now of the Local Energy Resources Network, our LERN's call, because we're here to learn together. So as always, I do love a good webcam. So if you want to share your screen, feel free, only if you're comfortable. If you have an opportunity just to give yourself a quick introduction in the chat, we would love to hear who's here. These are intended to be interactive, so please feel free. You can get yourself warmed up and ready to ask questions, make suggestions for your other local agencies that might be here and involved in today's call. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to start with introductions. I'm Angie Hacker, the CEEC Statewide Best Practices Coordinator. I'm joined today by John and Ryan from the CEEC team, and they're going to say hello in the chat. Also, you can always contact them if you're having any technical issues. So like I said, this is our 5th one of these. Each of them have been these interactive 1-hour monthly meetings, providing space for local governments and those that work with them to dive in on programs and opportunities that can help you advance your energy and climate goals. And so the idea is, we know you're super busy, especially right now. There's so much going on. Just come here and get briefed on the latest and most applicable opportunities. So one of our key goals with CEEC this year is to give you a heads up as we see things coming down the pipe. That means not just when a NOFA or solicitation becomes available, but even before that, where we have a bird's eye view of what's coming, that we can give you a little bit of a heads up, give you ample time to figure out if this is for you and if you want to ramp up or get a team or a game plan together. And today's a really good example of that. So after we run through our opportunity roundtable and our spotlight, we are actually going to be joined today by 2 representatives from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and they're going to be here to discuss the Community Economic Resilience Fund, which is a new program. And you may be thinking, I don't do economic development, but really you sustainability folks do. And that program is really about a transition to a carbon neutral economy. So you are a part of that, and we're happy that our guest speakers are here. I'm going to introduce them in just a bit. And just, to keep your interest, that program, there's going to be applications available next month. So hang around for the full hour. It's going to be a good conversation. By the end, we're going to go back to our Ask the BPC segment. And I really just want to invite you to be thinking as we make our way through the program today, what is it that you're working on right now where you might need a little extra help finding information on something you're working on? How can you outsource and ask to me or others on the phone that might be able to give you a lead on where some information might lie? And as always, don't stress about taking notes. All this is going to be sent to you afterwards. And in fact, John's going to be putting some links in the chat, so follow along. So as we go through this fire hose of information, you can always be grabbing links to the programs we're talking about. Okay, let's dive in. So we usually start this way with an opportunity roundtable, and sometimes it's me blathering about, but I do really hope that folks will also chime in on things that you are aware of from your perspective, and that would be programs, funding, other types of assistance, and any opportunities for input that you're aware of that others in your position would also likely benefit from knowing about. So please drop anything that you know of in the chat. It could even be a training or event, technical assistance, something we may have missed, and that helps us build out the weekly update that we offer through the CEEC program. So, since we last talked, I think nothing has changed necessarily on the Build Back Better bill. Last time we talked about the California proposed state budget, the governor's proposed budget. So you can still read about that on the link that John, I'm sure, is going to post here. And then I did want to just dive for a second back on the infrastructure bill. You all might remember we had Congressman Carbajal actually come and talk to us a little bit about that. So it's law now, and it went into effect in November. And they just came out with a guidebook to really help demystify what's in that for everybody else, including local governments. And so that link I found really useful. And so John's going to post that link right now. And if you go to page, I think it's page 156, that table is a table on the clean power and energy portion of the infrastructure law. I think it's useful to kind of keep your eyes out on the kinds of programs that are getting funded. I see a lot that's kind of R&D, but the thing that caught my eye is the second round of funding that I've ever seen for the EECBG program, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. And actually that's going to be, it says solicited potentially as soon as fall of this year. And so there's programs in the state here currently that have benefited from that first round. And it's usually a pretty great opportunity. If you go into this document, you can actually see some of the high level points for that program, the kinds of things that would be eligible, but it's right up our alley. And local governments are certainly would be eligible for that. Okay, so some other opportunities. So some funding opportunities there at the top. The California Energy Commission has a program called REACH. And the purpose of that solicitation is to demonstrate replicable and scalable business technology models for large-scale deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure capable of maximizing access for EV travel for multifamily housing residents. So if that's something that is maybe in your climate action plan or something else you're working on, that might be an opportunity that you look out for. It's coming quick. So that's February 18th. That's the deadline. Then the DOE has a program. It's called the Inclusive Energy Innovation Prize, and it's aiming to fund organizations for ongoing or proposed activities related to climate and clean energy. So basically the prize is seeking to enable and enhance business and technology incubation, acceleration, and other community-based and university-based entrepreneurship and innovation. So if you have a foot in sort of the clean tech world and the innovation world, or you have some stakeholders in your community that would benefit from knowing about this, and inclusive energy programs is on your priority list, then this might be an opportunity for you. It would be due February 25th. And finally, I'm not going to spend much time because we reviewed this last time in a little more detail, but the CEC's Rural Electric Vehicle Charging Solicitation is still up, due March 11th. And if you're part of our LinkedIn group, our SEEK LinkedIn group, I just posted a link for this morning's webinar on that program if you're interested in learning more. I'm sure there'll be a recording afterwards if you go in and register. So you might be noticing by now that I am fairly well obsessed with some of the bigger programs that are coming out of the state. I keep talking about them. And so the first one here under coming soon, this is OPR. This is a Community Economic Resilience Fund, and we're going to hear all about it today. So I'm not going to talk more about it now, but March, that's when we're expecting to see a solicitation. So stay tuned, we're going to get to that. Strategic Growth Council's got these two big programs. The Transformative Climate Communities program is actually now expected to come out March 8th. So that's in less than a month. And the guidelines are becoming clearer now, and we're actually working on an e-blast to get you out some more information. The eligibility is a little complex just in terms of figuring out if you have the right, if you have census tracts that would be eligible for projects. And so we're going to try to help you get a leg up on figuring out if that's something that you have, that you're eligible for, and if you have the right kinds of projects in mind for preferred populations or priority populations. And then the Strategic Growth Council also has a Regional Climate Collaborative. Remember, they came to speak with us a couple months ago. That solicitation is supposed to come out in spring. And down here further on the slide under input, that's the big input opportunity right now. They have public comment periods open right now on their draft guidelines. So you might remember when they came to talk to us before, they were sort of in listen session mode. So they did all that listening, and then they've put together draft guidelines, and now there's an opportunity to comment on them. So we're actually going to dive into that on the next slide just a little bit more. The other thing I just wanted to mention here under other assistance is our friends at 3C LERN have a training coming up And it's for, let me get down to my notes here. It's a course that's going to provide an overview of the changes of the 2019 Energy Code for single-family residential sections. So you all are aware, we keep talking about code changes. I was looking for a speaker, and then this is going to be a good set of experts that are going to talk to folks specifically about single-family residential code changes, and that's on that's going to be on March 1st, so coming right up, and I think registration is still open. The other opportunity for learning is through another training series called the Statewide Reach Codes Program. Had its first session last month. It was really good. CECEC is partnering on that. So if you are somebody who's new to the process of developing reach codes for things like electrification, but not exclusively electrification, this is a good place to get started, get your feet wet. It can get complicated, and this is sort of your easy way to get access to everything you might need to know, including, hearing from others that have gone through it, getting access to templates, and kind of shortcutting the process where you can. The next one will be on February 22nd, and you can still register for that. So we welcome you to do that. The series is a 5-series training. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. This is just, and you may have received this, but I just wanted to raise this and sort of amplify it a little bit, because I really think that this Regional Climate Collaborative program is going to be some of our best opportunity in the next couple of years. And this is going to really guide where the state's going in terms of how regions are expected to collaborate on climate change. So these are workshops so I mentioned their draft guidelines are becoming available, and they're hosting public workshops throughout the state. And so you would have an opportunity to attend any of them, particularly probably the one for your region. And so John's going to link the workshop website as well, so you can register for whichever ones of those that apply to you. So again, just a little a reminder on the Regional Climate Collaborative. So the Strategic Growth Council received $20 million over the next 2 years to implement this program, and it's expected to help assist under-resourced communities in accessing state funding for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency projects. So yeah, like I said, they've already gone through their listening, and but this one's good. This is where you really get to see where the rubber hits the road, and maybe you see some portion of the guidelines that you think don't work well for local governments and you want to make a comment on it. That would be the right moment to do that. Okay. I think that's all I have to say now. I see lots of things in the chat. I'm going to take a quick look. Oh, good. You all are sharing more opportunities for each other. Thank you. Okay, so 3CREN is also launching our Reach Code Support Program to provide technical and outreach assistance for jurisdictions in the Central Coast Valley. Awesome. Thank you. You know what? I might invite you guys to come do a spotlight on what you're up to, because it sounds like other jurisdictions can take advantage of what you're doing. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I think feel free to keep putting links and different information there. It really does help to hear from you all. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, now I'm very excited to get to the meat of our discussion, and we are really fortunate to be joined today by 2 representatives from OPR. So Mary Collins is the program manager. They are part of, and Fabiha Zaman is the senior program analyst. They are both part of the Just Transition team at OPR. And like I said, they're here to talk with us about the new Community Economic Resilience Fund. So Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you. And thank you guys both so much for being here. Just a reminder to our guests, feel free to put questions in the chat throughout as you're coming up with questions. And we're going to have a Q&A once they're done with the presentation. So thanks, Mary. Take it from here.
Thanks, Angie. This is such an incredible resource that you guys have. I was really loving listening to all these different opportunities coming down the pike. Some of them I'm familiar with, and then some of them I wasn't familiar with. And so this is such a great network and group and resource that you all have. And thank you for letting us come and be a part of this today. My name is Mary Collins. I'm with the Office of Planning and Research. I oversee initiatives and programs related to moving our economy to one that's more sustainable and equitable. And so the main work that we focus on is the Community Economic Resilience Fund. And this is a program that is run actually by 3 different agencies. So we're here from OPR today, but this is a product of the labor agency of GoBiz as well. So they're not here right now, but so we're representing the whole team. And it's really led by a leadership team of the three directors or secretaries. So the director of OPR, Samuel Asefa, Secretary Natalie Palugi of Labor, and Director Dee Dee Myers of GoBiz. And obviously we have a number of people working on this program, including Fabiha, and I'm going to pass it over to her. I feel like I talk about this program way too much, and so it's good to give people a break from hearing from me. So with that, I'm gonna pass it off to Fabiha to introduce herself and kick us off to tell us more about the CERF program. Fabiha?
Thank you, Mary, for that wonderful introduction. And John, if we can move to the slides so great, thank you. So you heard from Mary, who gave an overview on the structure of the program, the agencies involved, and the leadership team. And so I'd like to move to the next slide before we get into the program details, talk a little bit more about why CERF and why it's so important right now. So the first reason being recovery from COVID. Certain industries like tourism and hospitality fared worse. And the pandemic really exacerbated inequities that already existed for far too long. And so in recovery, we have to do better. Business as usual isn't an option. And so it's an opportunity to build equity into the process to ensure we have equitable outcomes. And as we work towards our climate goals, it's important to recognize that recovery and transition will go hand in hand in this process. So given the diverse nature of California's regions and its industries, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution for economic recovery and transition. But with each region's challenges, there's also a set of unique opportunities and competitive advantages. Next slide, please. So the program has 3 main objectives, the first being promoting a sustainable and equitable recovery. So in this objective is really focusing our investments and our efforts towards the most disproportionately impacted communities. The second being supporting inclusive planning. So this program is a first of its kind in its approach because of the scale of the program. And we need the perspective of local workers and community members because inclusive planning is a pathway to ensuring equitable outcomes. People across the state want a voice in planning their economic futures. And so the CERF presents an opportunity to kind of build on existing efforts and have a more expansive process for economic decision-making. And then the last being aligning investments and priorities to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel or creating conflicting processes or projects. And this is really important because you all got an overview of all of the different types of opportunities available at the state and the federal level. There's also philanthropy, and we want to make sure that all these resources support the work of CERF and vice versa. So it's an important objective of the program, and we'll definitely be dedicating staff time resources to providing support to the collaboratives on kind of aligning and leveraging different opportunities. Next slide, please. So the program has 2 phases. The first is planning and the second is implementation. The planning phase will help create 13 regional collaboratives that will each receive $5 million for planning through a competitive process. The goal is to establish new inclusive regional planning tables starting in the spring and summer of this year. And so much like a team of teams, these will incorporate existing local efforts and address planning on a broader regional scale. There's also lots of work to be done on inclusivity and the way that the most impacted communities and workers have been brought in or left out of the process. And so the planning phase presents an opportunity to really start shifting those power dynamics in decision-making at the regional scale. So the types of groups that we want to see at these tables include labor, business, community, government, and other types of stakeholders like economic development groups, philanthropy, education, workforce, and many more. The plans that will result from these collaboratives will include analysis on industry sectors and labor markets with actionable research. And throughout the process, our team will be providing technical assistance to guide the convening, evaluation, research priorities, and other needs during the planning phase. And then from the planning phase, the regions can identify new or existing implementation projects that meet the program criteria to compete for approximately 500 million in rolling grants from the fall of this year to June of 2024. And this includes reserve funding for each region for competitive bidding. The plans that will come from the planning phase are will be a result of a large collective regional effort, but we know that projects happen at a smaller scale. So this will be a way to provide resources to localities across these very large SERF regions. And so some of the things that we're looking for in the implementation projects include supporting economic recovery and transition, especially for populations and industries that were disproportionately impacted by COVID, promoting economic diversification and sustainability, and bolstering equity outcomes by race, ethnicity, gender, geography, and other indicators. Examples of projects could include entrepreneurship and commercialization programs, or programs to connect small and minority-owned businesses to industrial hubs and research institutions. Next slide, please. So you heard a little bit about the SERF regions, and I want to provide a little bit more context. So we have 13 finalized regions, as you can see on the map here, finalized by our leadership team in December of last year. And I will put a link to the chat actually, where you can find more detail on the regions. Every region will receive $5 million in planning grants, and these 13 regions will really help direct our investments throughout this program and potentially beyond. The regions you can see are very large. They're going to be very diverse. But the leadership team has purposely designed it this way so that we can help foster collaboration and planning that hasn't been done at a scale before. Next slide, please. And then you can see a list of the regions and the corresponding counties on this slide. Next slide. So the SERF program has 4 main terms and roles that will kind of help clarify the responsibilities and the different tasks throughout the program. The first being the High Road Transition Collaborative. So this team of teams is responsible for carrying out the requirements of the planning phase grant, and the collaborative should center community groups, environmental justice groups, and labor, and include business, economic development groups, workforce, and education, organizations, and local governments, as well as many other types of organizations. The neutral convener is the organization tasked with building the inclusive planning table. And this is a really important role because it will vary based on region, but we want an entity that has good relations and the ability to bring parties together. Examples of a neutral convener could be nonprofits, tribal governments, philanthropy, academic institutions, but we know we don't want a for-profit entity in the neutral convener role. So for some context, some of the things that we're looking for in a neutral convener include an ability to lead diverse stakeholders to successful action with a proven history of successful organizing in the region, proven relationships and credibility with diverse leaders and stakeholders across the region, and demonstrated commitment to advance equity outcomes in the region. The coordinator is someone that is hired at the local level by the neutral convener to support the organizing and facilitation that is required for the collaborative. And the fiscal agent is the last role we'll talk about, and it's also a really, really important role because the organization that is the best fit for a neutral convener in a region may or may not have the capacity to carry out the administrative tasks required of this program. So there's an opportunity to split that responsibility of convening and administration between 2 orgs. The fiscal agent is going to serve as the intermediary in grant management, and they'll be responsible for the funds, auditing, reporting, and they must have a fiscal history. Next slide, please. So this slide is reviewing the application requirements and eligibility. We went over that a little bit as we talked about the roles, so we'll move to the next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the overview and analysis required in the planning phase. So you can see the big picture priorities. They include elements from the program objectives, and these priorities will really frame how we look at the process and outcomes of the program. And then you can also see the types of analysis that will be required of the collaboratives. And I specifically want to point out the regional summary analysis that will help our team understand where each region is and help highlight ongoing processes so that we can continue to build on all of the work that went into those. Next slide, please. So as we hear from our stakeholders throughout the process, two elements of the program consistently are brought up, and that includes building inclusive planning tables and sub-regional dynamics. And so on this slide, you can see the considerations regarding inclusive planning tables from our listening session, but they illustrate the examples of what we're collectively thinking through together and the challenges of building regional tables. Next slide, please. And then on this slide, you can see the considerations regarding sub-regional dynamics. And I want to point out that these considerations you see on these two slides here from the inclusive planning tables and the sub-regional dynamics, we kind of framed our webinar that we held in January around these considerations, but we have also consistently heard feedback regarding sub-regional dynamics and building inclusive planning tables throughout our public comment collection process. Next slide, please. So this slide gives an overview of what we've done and where we're headed. The team is currently working to get the solicitation released in March, as you heard. And once that's released, we plan to have a webinar that will help break down the final guidelines and provide space to connect any interested organizations within your region. Next slide, please. That's the end of our overview. Thank you all so much for your interest and participation in the program. On the slide here, you can find information to sign up for our listserv. We often send program announcements and updates through our listserv. And additionally, we have a lot of resources on our website as well, the Community Economic Resilience Fund page on the OPR website. Thank you all so much again, and I will turn it back to Angie.
Thank you both. Thanks, Mary and Fabiha. Okay, so we're starting to get some questions in the chat. And actually, I'm glad Annie Seacrest over in SLO has raised this point. She says, when will CERF determine what, if any, changes it will make to the program based on the listening sessions last month? And that gives us an opportunity just to kind of provide a status check on where we're at in the process. Those sessions happened, the public comment period has ended, and so those changes are in effect right now, but I'll let OPR kind of answer this question.
Sure, I'll chime in on this one, Fabiha, and if there's anything I'm missing, feel free to add. So we recently got public comments back, not this last Friday, but the Friday before, the 28th, and have spent this past week going through these public comments, really organizing and synthesizing all of the recommendations that the public had. We had 144 organizations and local governments provide comments, and many of them through joint letters. And so we're taking what we got from the listening sessions to really refine what we put out in terms of the planning phase guidelines. If you were able to look at them, you might have seen that some of them are pretty broad, and we wanted to be able to take what we're hearing from people and incorporate that into the program. So in March, we'll be releasing the final solicitation.
Will the final guidelines come out before the solicitation?
No, the solicitation will come out at the same time.
Yeah, I see a question here from Garrett over in Santa Barbara County, and it's sort of similar. Let me just ask one question that I think sets a good framework for where Garrett's going to, which is just, can we look specifically through the lens of local governments back at those roles? Maybe if we even go back to that slide, and just figuring out where local governments really fit in those 4 roles and what they would be eligible for, because they weren't actually listed as an eligible applicant. And I don't know if that was an inclusive, a complete list or not.
Yeah, that's a great question. We didn't list them as an ineligible applicant. So the only entity that we mentioned as ineligible is a for-profit entity. And so we didn't explicitly say, hey, local governments can't apply. And so I think that's the question that a lot of people have from local governments. So first I'd say, number one, we're still formulating the final guidelines for the grant, going through our public comment and everything. So currently, as it stands, local governments are eligible to apply to be the neutral convener role. However, this is a regional program, right? Like economies happen at the regional scale. And so that's why we're approaching this from the regional level. And so given that, the question for you as a local government entity is, would you be the appropriate convener for other local government entities, for nonprofits, for labor, for business? And I think that is something to consider in terms of being at the table and being, participatory in the regional planning table. Local governments should be key members of that planning process. And with that is the ability to access, implementation dollars. As we're thinking about the first phase, it's planning. It's this inclusive planning process. The output rather of that is going to be a blueprint for moving forward the regional economy in a series of recommended investments throughout the region. And so, some of these programs, they might be something that touches on various geographic aspects of the region, while others might be a specific investment in a place. And one of the things that we are working on considering is making sure that there's going to be fair footing for all of the different geographic locations across the state to be able to access those implementation dollars. So it's really important to be at the table. But question is, would you be the best entity to bring all these different parties together?
Okay, hey, John, could you scroll back to that slide that has those 4 roles? I don't know the slide number, but that would be helpful because there's a few more questions on this that are starting to pop up. So that's helpful. Thank you, Mary. So you're thinking local governments would be eligible as a neutral convener, fiscal agent? Or is there any of them that they are not eligible to be?
Well, the first one is a group of entities, so that one we'll kind of ignore for now. But they technically are, as of right now, and with the caveat that we're still going through and creating the final guidelines based on the listening session, based on the comments that we received. But as of now, where we are at this moment, yes, local government entities could be a fiscal agent or neutral convener. I'd say with the neutral convener role, really think about if it's if you're ideally suited to bring a bunch of different parties together.
So Garrett Wong is asking, do conveners and fiscal agents need to be located within the region?
Yes.
Okay, that was easy. And then Jennifer West is asking, what about COGS or REN, so regional energy networks? Would they be an ideal neutral convener? And are you guys familiar with the regional energy network model?
I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with COGS, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about the regional energy network model, please.
Feel free anybody else to kind of chime in, but there's 3 regional energy networks right now. There may be more in the works, but they are energy efficiency program administrators that are operating primarily ratepayer programs, but they're also doing just broad clean energy climate change work, and they're already working on a regional scale.
A good example is the Southern California Regional Energy Network, which is tasked with providing renewable or energy efficiency support to local governments. That's all local governments throughout Southern California. So that could be a water district, a school district, a lighting district, a city, a county. And the challenge and the goal is to help identify, prioritize, and execute on energy efficiency projects throughout Southern California. And that's just one regional network. They have a lot of overlaps in terms of the services they provide, but their specific focus is a little different depending upon which REN they are.
Yeah. In terms of the what we're looking for in a neutral convener, we want the ability to bring different parties together, an entity that really has a strong sense of the various economic challenges going on in the region. So what are kind of the different industrial trends that are happening? What are the needs for economic diversification? What has happened due to COVID-19 in the area? And so while energy is a part of it, that there might be some other kind of sectors that are where we might want that entity to have kind of a higher lay of the land view, because there's other things, you know, beyond energy that could be considered as we're looking toward moving towards a carbon neutral future. You know, that includes natural and working lands, agriculture, and so on. So I would say they're not discounted from you know, applying, but you know, it would be ideal to have an organization or entity that kind of understands the high level view of the changing dynamics in the region with respect to the economy. Fabiha?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I'm not familiar with the REN like network either, but I do know that there are programs at the state, even at OPR, including the Regional Early Action Plan 2.0 REAP 2.0 program that is specifically targeted towards COGS and MPOs. And so you may want to consider like that funding through that program as a better resource for like some of the objectives for targeting funding towards these entities. And then this collaborative may look a little bit more different because it's at a much higher regional scale.
So I am glad to be corrected. Thank you, Benjamin. There are actually 4 regional energy networks officially now, one in the inland area, I think led by Western Riverside, was adopted in November 2021. So thank you. Let's see here. So I'm trying to see if we should stay on this topic. Let's see. Yeah, you know what? Let's stay on eligibility-ish for a second. So Garrett's also asking, please describe the criteria for evaluating equity and sustainability in scoring proposals.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that we're working on. We had some kind of general guidelines, especially as it relates to thinking through the analysis that would be required in the plans and the criteria for implementation projects that would be funded out of this. So we'll be coming out with more specificity on that later. I think that was a really big area where we got a lot of public comment and feedback. And I'd also, you know, kind of re-emphasize that this is a program that's funded by American Rescue Plan Act. And we recently actually just got the Treasury guidance on how the funds can be used just a couple of weeks ago. So that's another element that we're kind of combining in that impacts kind of our framing and our timing as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And, you know, we're having you here at a tough time where you're sort of not able to share the final version, but we really appreciate it because these are good questions and good things for you guys to be considering. If it were me sitting in a local government right now, I'd be getting my friends together and my partners in my region, and I'd be having some really good conversations.
Yeah, really excellent question. That's something that we're working on right now. So I appreciate the question.
Irene is asking a question, Irene Moosen, that's also about eligibility. She's talking about with CCAs. So that's another, you know, species of a regional energy program that
yes,
might not
I'm
be
familiar with community
okay,
yeah.
Okay, or JPAs with several jurisdictions be eligible as a neutral convener or fiscal agent. And it sounds like, you know, there's flexibility for that kind of thing, potentially.
Yeah, JPAs, CCAs, I'd say again, like the same answer with respect to local government. Like maybe it would be in a certain area would be ideal for a fiscal agent, but then, in terms of all of the different things that we're looking for in a neutral convener, would a community choice aggregator have that dedication and experience to equity and bringing together diverse parties to solve challenging problems, and so and then some of the kind of higher level regional economic lens of what's going on in the region, that's a big question in terms of their knowledge and capacity.
Okay, I'm going to go to a question by Jennifer West, and this I'm glad you raised this, Jennifer, because she's asking, can you give an example of the inclusive planning table? I'm not familiar with that term. I think that term, as well as the sub-regional dynamics, that was covered pretty quickly, and I think those are new terms for a lot of us. Can we dive into that, both of those, a little bit further? Maybe give some examples. And John, would you mind going to those slides?
Yeah, and those slides just had kind of examples from our our kind of public listening session that we're teeing off. So those were just examples of the types of questions that we're getting feedback on and considering. So there's a couple things with the first one, thinking about inclusive planning tables. There's a specific term, it's a high road transition collaboratives, which essentially is this group of entities that includes labor, it includes business, it includes workforce organizations, it includes environmental organizations, community-based groups, environmental justice groups, and those kind of more traditional economic development planners and economic development organizations, as well as local governments. And so with respect to economic planning, a lot of these entities have not been at the table yet. And so we often see, those that have been traditionally harmed by our economy, typically haven't had a seat at the table with respect to where our economy is going, how investments will be, put into the community. And so this program, the aim of this program is to expand the decision-making table and give folks who haven't traditionally had a seat at the table a seat there. And I'll pass it to Fabiha if she has anything else that I might be missing there.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly add, I appreciate all these questions about like what this might look like, but I think we're trying to design this program where we turn that a little bit back on you all. What do you think these tables will look like? Who do you think needs to be at that table? This is a regionally led process, and so there's going to be a lot of flexibility in letting the regions take back that decision-making power.
And so, yeah, and just to build on that, that's really good. I think, everybody appreciates flexibility. I think are there existing programs that this program was modeled after in California that you could help us, it just helps us visualize what it is that you're looking for? Or did you say that this hasn't happened and it would be brand new?
I'll kick it off, Fabiha, and then if there's other points to add in, I'll say broadly, no, this hasn't been done before. We're really changing the way that we approach economic development, and that's not only from the regional level, because we know economies really happen at the regional level, but it's also with the equity lens. And so we've gotten a lot of questions: is this an equity program or is this an economic development program? And the answer is, it's both. Unless we want to change, some of these systemic problems that are happening in our economy, we have to change the way that we do things. And so this is a very different way of approaching kind of bottom-up planning and including those who have been traditionally left out. So I would say, in terms of this model, part of the challenge and part of the opportunity is that it really hasn't been done before, and it's going to probably look a little bit different in every region. And so there's tough questions that we're working through right now as we go through the public comments, as we recently just got these Treasury guidelines on how the program will be formed. But with that, in terms of models, there's been great examples that have come up in terms of high road training partnerships, of the transformative climate communities. I've heard examples of different participatory budgeting processes that have been used as examples. And so there's the spirit of those different programs that will, help inform this program. But Fabiha, I'll pass it to you in case there's other aspects I might be missing.
Sure. I think, yes, to summarize kind of the answer to that question about modeling after different programs, it's a yes and no, it's new. But we also want to keep the spirit of these suggestions that we're seeing of these programs, that the best practices that have come out of these programs, and adapt it to work with CERF. And then I'll also point out, for instance, we've also heard a lot about the SEDS process, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies process, through the EDA. And so we're hoping to design the program in a way that incorporates all of these existing efforts. That's why that regional summary analysis is going to be so important, because it'll help us identify what is ongoing and how can we build this program so that it builds in your efforts as well.
I think on that note, Cora has asked, did I understand this correctly? The analysis required on slide 11 is what we need to show for a project grant using CERF phase 1 funding. So I think, yeah, there we go. The analysis required. So how recently do these analyses need to be completed? And is that the SEDS or is that different? I guess you have a variety of things here.
Okay, that's a great question. So the SEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and that's something that is affiliated with the with EDA, and you receive funds to be able to do that. Everything that's on here is a requirement of that, so that these groups can continue on and receive EDA funding later, and this would be counted as a SED. So we're working with the federal government to ensure that there's alignment with the way we're looking at this program. So these tables can be ongoing past the timeline of the grant. So I'll say that first. And then, in terms of the analysis required, so with our first phase, it's this inclusive, table building process that also includes the design of a blueprint for where the region is going economically. What are the big gaps and challenges? What are the different industries that might be on the rise in that region? And so these are the different aspects for that particular blueprint. And there's going to be ample time to be working on this, because the process of bringing people together, doing the analysis, which will require contracting, this is going to take a long time. And so, we're looking at a year to 18 months to be getting this type of plan together. And part of that will be recommendations for investment based on this inclusive planning process and the research that's been done.
There's a new question here, just diving a little bit more on the screen here. We see sustainability. I think somebody's just wanting to know a little bit more about how that's envisioned. What they said, we would appreciate info on the possible environmental climate impact of this program, or just maybe how you anticipate achieving this sustainability priority.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it goes to the different criteria that we have in the kind of planning documents, really aligning with some of our state climate goals. And then also, for investments, what's the checklist of criteria going to look like? Right now we have sustainability, and that's a really broad brushstroke, right? And so we received a lot of comments and feedback on the need to be more detailed, be more expansive. We totally understand that, and that's something that we'll be continuing to work on, especially as we're considering the implementation phase and what we'll be funding for the program. We want to make sure that we aren't building up industries that are contributing to the to carbon emissions, right? As we're growing new industry, we want to make sure that they are not contributing to the to water issues, to carbon emissions. So that is really the lens of what we're looking at in the program, and we're going to be coming out with more specifics in terms of the research, and then also criteria for projects.
And I'll add, I think this is a good time to point out that the CERF program is also tied to the RCC program you all heard about earlier. There's a legislative tie. In the CERF legislation, it's mentioned that our collaboratives need to work together. So it's a broad mandate, and CERF and RCC are still kind of defining what that collaboration looks like. But as an example, the RCC collaboratives will obviously be involved in accessing funding for a range of different climate projects at whatever scale the RCC collaboratives function in. But then they do definitely have an opportunity to bring those challenges and priorities to the larger regional economic planning process that CERF will be conducting. And then RCC can also just serve as a capacity building or technical assistance support to many smaller subregions within the larger CERF region as well. So there's an example of how the CERF program is tying to a program that is climate focused to kind of help California reach its climate goals.
Yeah, well, you all out there doing the work that's leading to a carbon neutral economic transition. So you are key to all this. Like I said, I'd be getting my economic development workforce friends together, along with all my, my environmental justice friends. I think Mary and Fabiha, you all will be so pleasantly surprised when you start getting applications, because I'm seeing the folks that are the kind of folks on this call are really doing thoughtful work on bringing these kinds of stakeholders together already. I think you're going to see some good history already. Okay, last question, and then I need to move to the other little segment, which is just on is there an intention to have this be a recurring funding source or a one-time kind of seed fund to get these things going, or what do you see there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this was out of last year's budget, which some people refer to as a once in a generation series of investments from the state government, from the federal government. And this is $600 million funded by American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so, so with that, we hope that this is a seed to, help change the way we approach economic development, both from the geographic scale and from the equity lens. I'll say, although this is a $600 million program, one of the real key objectives that we have is helping all these tables navigate this unprecedented influx of programs, of capital, from this budget season, from last budget season. And so helping guide economic recovery is going to be one of the key things that this program does. And then, we are ensuring that these tables can live on past the program by aligning that with EDA's SEDS and, aligning that with federal government programs.
And I'll just add really quickly, I want to touch on the design of the collaboratives. Like, we're really interested in supporting strong, meaningful partnerships to strengthen the social infrastructure within the different regions to kind of inform the future economic planning or projects within a CERF region. And so that infrastructure that we're kind of building or supporting that in each region will kind of help these tables live on past the lifetime of the grant as well.
All right, well, I think we'll have to close this portion of our meeting out here. And I want to really thank you, Mary and Fabiha, for being with us. That was so useful, totally opening my eyes to get a clearer picture on this program. And like I said, yes, Derek, thank you, Mary. 13 regions, each region will receive $5 million. Like I said, this is just a good time, right? You have an extra month right now to be thinking through who your partners might be, how you might fit into all of this. So I would use it if I were you to see if this is something you're going to pursue. Okay, so thanks again, ladies, and we'll probably reach out to you again someday. Good luck as you wrap up your guidelines.
Thank you.
And thanks for having us.
You're welcome. All right, John, let's go to the next slide here, which is really more of our our open time to ask questions. So this is our Ask the BPC time. So if you have questions, and it's not something I have to answer here, but it's basically if you want to submit a request for, hey, help me find this information, I can go and try to find that for you. You might get lucky and have somebody on the phone who knows something about it. So if you are working on something and you're a little stuck, or you are looking for a best practice or a template or an expert that can help answer some questions, drop it here. You can, folks can raise their hand during this period of time too. Not everything has to be in the chat. So I just want to give a little space for folks to do that. We've had some folks actually got some things answered here on these calls. So while you're thinking and maybe writing, I want to do a little check-in with you. I have a poll that I'm going to ask John to run. And I just want to hear a little bit from you guys. This is, we've done this 5 times now. What are the most useful aspects of these LERN meetings? And I think it's true, John, that they can select more than one, right? Okay, yeah, you can select more than one here. So your options are to, the overview of timely opportunities, the deeper spotlight on one opportunity, presentations from guest speakers like we just had. Is it the discussion between attendees and the guest speakers that's the most useful aspect, or this little piece here, time to ask for help from BPC or fellow attendees? Just which of these are you finding to be the most useful parts? Because we can always kind of shift around what you guys are finding the most valuable. We want this to be a really good investment of 1 hour of your month. So let's see here. I don't see anything new in the chat. John, do you want to go ahead? How are we doing on proportion of people that have answered?
We are at about 60%, 65%.
All right, that's not bad. Let's go ahead and close it. All right, you want to share the results? Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. All right. So what's coming? And then next up would be presentations from guest speakers. And okay. Yeah, I know. I'm feeling like this BPC thing. It's like, I really want to be helpful, but I feel like it's maybe not the right time to be asking you all to be just submitting a random request. So maybe what I do here is just a little reminder at the end to say we're here to help, and give you my email address so that you can always contact us offline to answer any questions. Okay, let's see here. One thing I do maybe want to do in the future is sort of use a little of this time as a bit of a sounding board for some things that we're working on in SEEK. So you know that part of what we do is to try to develop information and knowledge in a way that can really ease the burden off of you. And I do have one question for you, and that is, I think a lot of you are out there probably scanning your regions for constituent facing programs that you don't necessarily have to offer, but that are available for your commercial, industrial, agricultural, residential sector. And I am thinking that there might be some economies of scale here in developing a little bit of a guide to constituent facing programs where there could be a high level scan done of the places where local governments could easily leverage existing programs that could support their constituents, promote those, share those, not necessarily have to develop them themselves. Is that something that anybody feels like would be valuable to them and potentially even help maybe provide some input on? You can chat, or maybe just give me a hand raise if that's something you're like, yeah, I might look at that, or a thumbs up, or a hand raise, or some kind of reaction winky. Okay, somebody says, Angie, that would be hugely helpful. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are doing the same work, over and over again, and that seems maybe unnecessary. We probably learn a lot from each other. So if I develop something, then I would want to ask you all what you know, and then we would create something that works for everybody. It isn't going to get down to say, all right, City of Escondido, here's everything that your constituents would possibly want to know, but in general, here's where to go for certain kinds of programs and the kinds of programs that might be available. All right, cool. Well, let's see. I haven't seen anything else come up as a question. Yeah, Susan, I agree. Okay. So let's go to the next slide here. This is the last thing I really want to mention, which is the save the date has gone out for the CEEC forum. So September 21st and 22nd in San Diego in person. So just that's it. Save the date. We're excited to see you and hopefully get to hang out with you. And you'll probably see some other notices come out. And last, I think if you scroll ahead for 2, yeah, go to the next one. This is just our next meeting, March 8th. I'm excited because we're going to have, actually the Strategic Growth Council is coming back, but they're going to talk about the Transformative Climate Communities program, because I really want them to dive in on the eligibility and get you all thinking in the same way that we did today about whether or not you're eligible, this is right for you, and get you started on thinking before the solicitation comes out. So that's what we're doing next. Feel free to bring a friend, share this information, and always contact me with other ideas or requests. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.